You're a look before you leap, not a just do it kind of person. What are you waiting for? It's not that you're waiting, it's that I need some information.
I almost find comfort in that. I also sometimes view that as a possible, I don't know if weakness is the correct word.
It's not a weakness, it's who you are. This is Raymond. He's an elementary school teacher with a plan for everything. He acts as the rock for his students and his family. Sometimes he feels like he's missing out.
When I was first starting out teaching, I had some lesson plans made for me and given to me, and I bombed in them. And I didn't realize until after my strength in the classroom comes from being prepared. You can see these videos of me when it's someone's lesson and when it's mine. It's like two different people.
Especially looking at the entirety of your Kolbe result. If you're in a chaotic environment, your instinct is, hey, let's figure this out. And how can you bring some normalcy and some consistency to that chaotic environment? Today, we're talking about how Raymond can lean into his strengths and avoid good advice gone bad in the classroom. Well, let's jump in a little bit with your Kolbe result, and I'll kind of link that in a little bit to moving schools. And your highlight is you're a master of planning. It's a talent, a skill. It's also a need in this case, because your cognitive strengths are all about the way you naturally take action, and you need to have the freedom to be yourself and to do things the way that works best for you. Look, we all live in the real world. It doesn't mean 100% of the time we're all going to get to do exactly what is most natural and normal for us. But to the extent you can, you need to be able to plan, have a time frame, look out into the future and say, okay, here's where I am, here's where I want to go. What are the steps to get me, the in-between parts? That is really what you do. So I would imagine for something like moving to a new school, it's not like you wake up one morning or, you have a conversation with your spouse and go, oh yeah, let's just change this and just jump into it. Is that true? Like in this transition, was this something you thought about and planned for?
Oh, absolutely. Like you nailed it. It was something that I like very meticulously planned and took multiple steps to try to make sure that it was successful.
Yeah, well, and that's great because sometimes we all feel pressure from different people. It could be from a spouse, could be from people at work, could be friends. Like, your friends might see you with a long commute and young kids and say, hey, you know what, Raymond, you need to change just now. Like pick up the phone. I have this buddy at this other school. I think, they're looking for somebody, just do it. And they mean well. And it might be, might be the first step, but for you it would be, okay, great. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the school? Let me do some research. Let me figure out the plan. You need to know about this well in advance. So I see you nodding. So I'm glad it sounds like you have the opportunity to do it that way this time.
Yeah. You said research, and that speaks to me. Like if I'm going to jump into something, right, I'm going to like research it before I dive in. And then that helps me actually make my plan.
Well, and that's actually, we'll kind of expand in full your Kolbe results. And we do it by 4 what we call action modes. Each action mode is how you deal with a different set of kind of taking action. So the fact finder action mode is how we deal with gathering and sharing information. You're a 7. The follow through action mode is how we deal with systems and structure. You're an 8. So for both of those, that means you kind of initiate action with those 2. The third action mode is quick start, and you're a 2. So your strength, as we talked about, is the way you are open-ended and adaptable. And then the fourth one is implementer, and you're a 4. So you're in that mid-range. You kind of accommodate the need for physical touch, construction, building. So yeah, overall, your Kolbe result, 7, 8, 2, 4. Which is really just a short description of your strengths and the way you naturally take action. I mean, I talked about your natural advantage being the master of planning, but your bigger, fuller picture Kolbe result is, yeah, you back up your initial strength, and kind of the way you usually start problem solving or taking action on something is putting it into a plan, a system, a structure, rather than just, so again, let's take the teacher move, the professional move. You'll think about it, and before you even do the research, you'll think a few steps ahead. You'll think about, okay, what might this look like? What would I need to get there? What do I need to do? And then it's, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'm motivated. I want to do this for whatever reason. In this case, shorter commute, more time with family. Now let's map that out. And then you typically go to the next stage, which is, okay, now that I have a plan for what I want to, how I want this to happen over the next year or two, now let's do the research. What are the schools closer to home? What kind of school is it? So for you, it wouldn't be just a matter of I'll take any old job. It would be, I want to know about the curriculum. I want to know about the people I'd be working with. Is it team teaching? Is it not? You'd want all those answers before you even submitted an application, whereas other people would be like, yep, I'm going to make this move. Let's start applying. I'll figure it out later. Is that
Oh,
how this works for you?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely a situation where I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't the right situation, right? Like I had to analyze it first and be like, okay, is this move the right move, right? Have those conversations with my wife, right? And then act on that.
Yep. Yeah. So that second part is your fact finder. The planning part is what we call your follow through. And so you're an 8 in follow through. You're a 7 in fact finder. So you still are, you have this drive to get information, facts, figures, details, get them for yourself, also to share them with people. So in discussions with your wife, and I don't know her result, has she taken a Kolbe Index?
No, that's actually fascinating. I hadn't thought about that. I'd love to see what her results would be.
All right. Well, we'll get you a coupon so that she
Yeah,
can take it. And if you want, we can have another quick chat, maybe with the three of us. But
that'd be awesome.
so neither of us need to guess at her result. We'll just let her do it. But with you in those discussions, A, you'd need to have a plan. B, you would probably share that plan and you'd share the stuff you found. So some people, A, wouldn't do tons of research. And maybe, even if they start with the plan and the system and, hey, I have this 3-year vision for what I want my career, my family life to look like. You share all that. You go into detail, you go into depth. You would talk about it with your wife. Again, look, we'll have different relationships with spouses too. And again, I don't know hers, but for you, it would be important to say, here's what I found. Here's what my research, here's my thinking. Even if she doesn't need it. And for some spouses, it's, oh my gosh, I really wish my husband would stop. I have enough. Like, he wants to do it. I'm supportive. Like, don't tell me all the things you've researched. I trust
Yeah.
you. Whereas other people, like if it were the opposite, if your wife if she were considering a move, you'd ask questions. You want the information. And I'd also say, like in a personal life, that can be tricky. So if your wife, frankly, whatever her Kolbe result is, given the kind of person you are where you need the information, your questions and needing that information, it's not a matter of, well, I don't trust you or I don't think you're making a good decision. It's like, well, yeah, I trust you implicitly. Sounds like you're making a great decision. I still need the information and the details for myself, having nothing to do with you. So that's one area where I'll say, be a little aware. And this is where I'd love to hear what your wife's results are. And even if you don't share them with me, just for the two of you to talk about. But honestly, no matter what her results are, if she's also an initiating fact finder, she's more likely to share information with you. Whatever research she's doing in details and information. She's also more likely to then ask you questions. But if she's asking questions, even though you're an initiating fact finder and you'll naturally share the information, it can also sometimes sound like a challenge rather than just curiosity. So I don't know that that's the dynamic you guys have, but just be aware of that. So if she pushes back on you, sometimes asking questions and, honey, why don't you believe me on this? Take a deep breath, step back and say, hey, gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to come off like that. It's just, I'm really curious. I'm really invested and involved, and turn it around. So instead of her, in this case, feeling like you're challenging her, it really is a sign that you're engaged, you're involved. When you disconnect from something is when you don't ask questions and need information. So in some respects, she should be more concerned if you don't ask questions, because then
Yeah.
it's like, don't you care? Like, I'm making this big life decision, even though it's more for me than for us. Don't you want to know? So just something to think about.
I love that example you use because that's, as a teacher, you want your students asking questions all the time. And if they're not, they're usually not engaged, right? So like that just,
Right. But also, yeah, so let's get back to you rather than you and your wife, especially because I don't know her Kolbe result, but your role as a teacher. Teachers have such an A important, but B kind of tricky role sometimes. How many kids do you have in your classroom or will you have next year?
so actually I don't have my roster for next year, but my last classroom was 18, and it was actually
18.
a split class of fifth and sixth combined.
Okay. So relatively small for most teachers to only have 18 in a room. So that's fantastic. Uh, but even at a relatively small 18, you've got all kinds of different kids. You don't get to control for that. So let's take your follow through. So, and we'll have to get to the rest of your Kolbe result. I was going to say all of it, but let's stick with your follow through. So you naturally plan and have a system and a structure and an organization. And some of those 18 kids undoubtedly shared that Kolbe result or that cognitive strength to be systematic and organized and plan and live within those structures that you probably create for your classroom. Others of them are at the opposite end of the spectrum. So one of the tricky things for a teacher is, look, you can't, even at 18, you can't individually customize everything for every student. And yet I feel strongly that a teacher's role is to be flexible enough, and we can talk a little bit about good ways for teachers and others to do that, flexible enough to help get the most out of all different kinds of kids in your classroom. So where it's a student who is naturally systematic and structured and organized like you, that's probably easier because for almost everybody, especially before you really get to know Kolbe and even this concept of what conation is, you typically lead with your strength and kind of impose that on the environment that you're in. So in this case, you professionally, makes total sense for you to have a plan and to tell your kids, hey, for the unit, which is going to be the next, whatever, 4 weeks, let's say, here's what it looks like. And you tell them, and even though you're teaching fifth and sixth grade, you still might have something that looks like a college syllabus, even if you don't share it all with them. But my guess is you probably would. Like, hey, here's what we're going to be doing. We're talking about, you teach language arts some, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it could be, oh, here's our next grammar unit, and here's what it's going to look like over the next 4 weeks. And the kids in your classroom that share your 8 and follow through, they just eat that up. That is so helpful for them to see a system and a structure and be able to plan out mentally the next 4 weeks. I don't want to go overboard with this. They're fifth and sixth graders, so that doesn't mean they're going to put it all into their own system and structure. But you'll be able to tell, especially now that you know all this. And Eric has come in and talked to the kids at the school, so you've seen his talk also. But keep in mind, some of the kids in the classroom, they start hearing that plan, and if they can start feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be put in a straitjacket. There's no opportunity for me to freestyle and to do things differently and to, get partway through and find shortcuts. And for any leader, and in this case, you being the leader as a teacher, we need to be aware of those things. It's not about taking you out of your game. I would never say, hey, Raymond, you shouldn't plan as much as you do. No, that's what's going to make you a great teacher is when you get to use that strength that you have. But this tricky role of a teacher is you also need to find a way for your teaching to accommodate all those kids. Again, it can't be infinitely variable for each one, but it's got to be open-ended enough that those kids who aren't like you can also thrive.
Yeah.
And that's a tricky thing. So yeah, starting, using the example of the planning. So I'll just describe myself. It's been a while since I was a fifth or sixth grader. But I'm the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of systems and structure from you. So, thinking of myself in a situation like that, just little things like having when you turn in your homework, and I remember this very distinctly, in the upper right-hand corner, you need to put your name, followed by the teacher name, followed by the class period. So like fourth grade, Mr. Jameson, David Kolbe, Mr. Jameson, period 4. And that was the requirement. And if I didn't do that and I turned my homework in without that, I got 0 credit. Well, that happened. probably more than once, but I know it happened at least once, and it stung because I cared about my grades and I got a 0 on that homework assignment. Well, I can go and complain to the teacher. That's not fair. First of all, as my parents love to tell me, life isn't fair, so get over it. Secondly, it doesn't matter whether you think it's fair, and frankly, it is fair. Did Mr. Jameson tell you the expectations? Yes, he did. Okay, so it's not unfair. It may not work to your advantage because that's not normal for you, but he told you it is an expectation, so you just need to live with it. So what are some solutions? Like for a student, for me in this case, my parents helped me with, you know what, David, you're not going to remember to do that every time. So you also have that binder, the notebook, it was this old school time when it was all paper and pencil. And, for 5th and 6th grade, a lot of it still is. So it's just write that ahead of time. Just put your name, Mr. Jameson, 4th period. I think we were also supposed to have the date that we were submitting it. Like, okay, you can't do that ahead of time, but I'll bet Mr. Jameson will still give you credit if you forget the date, if you put the other things. So there are solutions for students, and you don't have to wait for parents to give those kinds of solutions. You can tell your classroom, look, this is the expectation. I'm not changing that. And if they need to know why, and it would be more the initiating fact finders like you, and also I'm an initiating, they may say, why? What do you care? I'll tell you why, because I get a lot of papers, guys. And if I have to figure out, wait, whose handwriting is this? It's a giant pain in the neck for me. And wouldn't you rather have me get to spend my time designing cool stuff for you to do rather than spend my time figuring out whose assignment this is? Anyway, they'll get that. I think it's important. Again, you have such an important job, helping
Yeah,
kids get on the right track in life. But
I thought it was so fascinating when Eric came in and did the assessment with the classroom, because without knowing my students, the only student that he knew better than me was his own child, obviously, right? But he didn't know these students, and he was able to identify certain ways that they might learn better. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was so accurate. And he's like, I know you don't know that kid, but you nailed it. You're like, this one would rather give an oral presentation. This one would rather take a test. And it was just like, wow, right? And very different ways to like express the knowledge that they gained, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's another example of the ways that you as a teacher can give every kid the opportunity to thrive. Look, at some point, all of them need to be exposed to. You have to give an oral presentation, but there can be other times where in a unit, it's like, hey, here are the 3 different ways you can wrap this up. You're allowed to do a written assignment. You're allowed to do an oral presentation or even a skit or whatever, and then they can choose. And, frankly, in life, most of the time there's some flexibility for us, and it may not be day to day, but we can choose a different career based on what we know is going to be best for us. So you're setting kids up for success when they have, and again, it's not about lowering expectations. Sometimes people think, oh, you want to make it too easy on them. No, make the expectations rigorous, but then set them up for success so they get to meet those high expectations in a way that suits them best and that develops their skills. Again, you don't give them a free pass on, well, you'll never have to do an oral presentation because that's not your preferred or most natural style, but you don't have to do it every single time. The next thing is your quick start. So your strength in quick start is to stabilize. You figure out what is going well and you stick with that. You don't just jump on the latest trend just because. You don't abandon what's working just because you feel like changing it up. You're kind of a rock in that sense. Like people can count on you to be that person that when things are going well, you keep chaos from bubbling up around you. Sometimes, frankly, where chaos is already there, you're the one who will, especially looking at the entirety of your Kolbe result. If you're in a chaotic environment, your instinct is, hey, let's figure this out. What is the pattern in the system that already exists, even if it doesn't seem like there's much, and maybe there isn't much there? What is there, and how can you bring some normalcy and some consistency to that chaotic environment? And that's a really important strength. Sometimes it gets overlooked. You're at a 2, and so we would call that the counteract or prevent strength in quick start. And whichever of the 4 action modes has that, it's oftentimes overlooked. Like people don't see it as a strength so much as sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, Raymond, seriously, why can't you just be more spontaneous?
Right. And I was actually, I
Because
had a
you're
question
probably
for you
not
about
that
that.
classically spontaneous person. Is that true?
Yeah, and I actually had a question about that. Like, because I strongly agree that I almost find comfort in that, like finding something that works and sticking with it. But I also sometimes view that as a possible, I don't know if weakness is the correct word, but it's like it prevents me from being spontaneous, and sometimes that makes you miss out on the new things, right? Like
Yep.
and is there a way to, I guess, still harness the strength, but also not get stuck in your ways, I think is the
Sure.
the right way to put it.
Yeah. So number one, let me start with kind of the soft parts, and then I'll get to a very more specific or answer. Um, it's not a weakness. It's who you are. There might be times where there are consequences of who you are that you don't love as much, or they're, not as good for a particular project or professional setting. But it's not a weakness. It's nothing you need to apologize for. It's part of who you are. And especially, it's not a weakness. I want to flip it. And that's why I described it. It's your strength in Quick Start. And then if you look at your entire result, it's, yeah, you do need to have a system and a structure and a plan. And yes, you need information and details before uh, you're not oh, just do it. You're a look before you leap, not a just do it kind of person. So, or, just go for it. What are you waiting for? It's not that you're waiting. It's that, yeah, I need some information. Also appreciate when you're feeling that way, and you're going to feel that way. And by the way, people who are at the other end of the spectrum have different things where they feel like, oh, yeah, but maybe this is my weakness. So somebody at the other end of the spectrum in terms of quick stars, like, I keep doing this where I just jump in and I don't know what I should have known beforehand, and it really burns me. And man, I wish I had thought a little bit more before I just jumped into that next thing that I did. And by the way, there can be serious consequences like bankruptcies and
Right.
divorces, and then they look back on it like, oh man, I wish I was more like Raymond, or like those people, to take you out of it. I wish I was more like those people who had more of a plan and a system and got a little more information before they just jumped into this stuff. So we all have regrets, and we can look back and go, oh, I wish maybe that last time I was different. Don't even worry about it. Like, you are who you are. And so now in terms of what to do, because yeah, I totally understand there are times where you can look at a situation and kind of step outside of your body almost, and your cognitive or your thinking part of your brain is like, I should be more spontaneous here. Like, let's say, and I'll get back to a personal one, and because I think this is a fairly common thing. So again, I don't know your wife's result, but for a second, let's just hypothesize she's very different and she is maybe more spontaneous, and just try things out and experiment. So cognitively, you can think, you know what? That's important to my wife. That's how she operates. So I need to do that. That would be I'd be being a good supportive husband to drive that once in a while, or at least accommodate it when she wants to do it. So here's my recommendation to you. Now that you're in that mode where you've identified it, use your strengths. So say, I'm going to plan for spontaneity. Now, that might sound stupid, but there are ways to do it for a spouse that are really effective. So you don't tell her you're planning for it. So I don't know, like next month something is coming up, and let's say, hey, it's summer. I've got time off. We're going to be able to take a vacation. And you plan some stuff out, but you don't tell her, and you spring it on her more last minute. And by the way, maybe you have three options like, hey, honey, you know what? This weekend, and we happen to be recording this on a Friday, so you can go to one on a Friday and say, hey, this weekend we've got some time, and I was thinking we could do this, this, or this. Now to you, you've already planned them out. You've done the homework, but to her, it's last minute. You're giving her options. And by the way, make some of those options things that you've never done as a couple or as a family. And if they totally crash and burn, that's okay. And again, I don't know your wife is like this, so it might be terrible advice because she might be like, no, I want to plan it just like you. But if it is true, and by the way, it could be one of your kids. Like if you notice, especially with your 7-year-old, she might be somebody where She needs more spontaneity. She
Which
drives
she
that
does. She absolutely does.
there. So you can, especially in that role as a parent, it's easier for her not to know that it's planned out and you've done your homework. It's just you giving her three options and she gets to pick, and it's something she's never tried before. And that's awesome for her. She needs it. Whereas if it's some kids are the opposite, where it's please don't spring this on me last minute. Give me advanced warning. Let me taste it a little bit before I jump in. So it's more of a progression where she might be please, dad, let me jump into the deep end. And there, as a parent, what you need to provide is safety and security because kids don't understand what they can't do. And I don't just mean literally like jumping in a deep end and drowning, but still, we can use that as an example because it's a real one. Like she wants to jump in. For a kid like that, let her jump in, like in a literal sense, let her jump into the deep end of a pool before she can swim. But you're right there. You're not going to let her be unsafe or suffer really bad long-term consequences. And then she learns from it. So she jumps in, she has a bad time, but don't make it traumatic. You get her to the side of the pool and be like, oh, so what was that like? And she might say,
Right.
that was awesome. Like it was
Yep.
terrible. I failed, but
Yes.
I want to jump in the deep end again. And she gets
Yes.
better. Whereas another kid, maybe your 2-year-old is, don't make me jump into the deep end. Let me sit on this edge of the pool and dangle my toes first and then sit on the first step. It doesn't make one of those kids better or worse. It's just you then as a parent figuring out how can I help them and develop in a way that's going to be best for them. If they have a desire to become a world-class swimmer, if you take the kid that is the more natural jump into the deep end and you make her take slow, incremental, planned out steps, she's going to hate swimming at an affective, like, I just don't like it. Whereas if you let her jump into the deep end, even if it means she fails the first few times, that's awesome. And the opposite is then true for the other kid. And we don't know what your 2-year-old is necessarily, but and I think a big advantage that you have as a teacher is, I said, it's such a tricky role, but you also are used to being forced to see people operate in different ways. Whereas I think in a lot of professions, professional leaders in businesses are more often set up for, all right, you're leading a team of 10 people. You can just tell them what to do and how to do it. So I talked before about, with students, don't compromise on what they're accountable for or what your standards are, but give them freedom to get there in different ways. Same thing with other professions. I tell them, don't compromise on what your team is supposed to do and achieve, but understand people are going to get there in different ways. So in a professional setting, it's more put people in those roles that work best for them. Kind of like I was saying with you, let students show you their proficiency, demonstrate their proficiency in different ways. With professional managers and organizations, with adults, it's more put those people in roles where they get to do the things that are going to be, most suited for their strengths and therefore help the team achieve its objectives together. What other things have you seen? You were kind of talking about with your students and you had the benefit of seeing Eric. So you saw that he was able to predict some behaviors from those students. What else have you seen now that you've been exposed to it with your students and the way they do things in the classroom?
Yeah. So the kind of the style of teaching that I was educated on was this thing called universal design. And it really kind of like incorporates a lot of what you've been speaking about, where it's like you can't change your instruction individually for each student. But what you try to do is you try to find, kind of groupings of students. Like these are the ones that are, like you said, maybe these ones are the ones that want the more spontaneous stuff. These are the ones that want more structure. And what you can do is you can design one lesson that almost universally grabs all of them, right? And the first 3 weeks you're teaching a little bit, but the first 3 weeks in your classroom, what you're really doing is you're trying to see how each student learns and how they interact with lessons and how they interact with each other, right? And it's like you're almost, and maybe this is me speaking as someone who wants to make a system, but you're almost designing this blueprint for, okay, how am I going to get all of these different thinkers involved, right? And And it's been fascinating. With these students, I had students that were, I'm going to be participating in every single group discussion, right? But when you have 18 kids and you have 3 kids talking all the time, is it a group discussion? I don't know, right? So it's like you try to
Right.
find ways to try to, like you said, actually, I love your example how there's certain students that the way to get them involved in a group discussion was actually kind of pre-teaching the discussion to them and making them feel safe about it. And what I would do with some of them is I would have them have a small group. I call it table talk. Let's have a table talk first, where it's not as scary. They don't have the spotlight on them, right? And you let them talk first and feel safe, right? And then you get them in, and then they can kind of keep up with the kids that are ready to talk out at all times, right? And so, in my experience, it's just like trying to identify all of these speakers or all these thinkers and how these thinkers mesh together as a collective group.
I love that. Yeah, and I think so. I don't know that much about universal design, but sounds like the principles very much align with what we're talking about, where it's giving kids with different styles the ability to rise to the top. Um, and so let me just tap in here because I still haven't finished your full result. The last of the 4 things that we talk about is your implementer, which isn't implementer as in like implement, carry things out to fruition. That's more the follow through, but it's really about the use of tools and implements is where the name comes from. But it's about the physical, tactile, tangible, hands-on way we all take action. So you're a 4, so you're near the mid-range. And it's the first of the 4 modes where you're really near that mid-range, where you really bridge the different sides of this continuum or spectrum of strengths in the tactile, tangible, three-dimensional world. So you will demonstrate things some. You will get your literal hands on objects and construct, but it's more for you about kind of restoring and repairing rather than building from scratch. So in your teaching, sure, you'll have some props that you will use to physically show and demonstrate kids, but it's not what you do all the time. It's not what you lead with. That's more, you will have almost a script for what you're doing. It isn't, I mean, I know you can't script out a day at school because things are, they are
Yeah.
spontaneous, at least in the sense of they flow, but you'll still know, like, here's where I'm going to start. I need to cover these 4 principles. I'm going to talk about these things. So it isn't literally scripted, but it will be pretty well planned. And again, maybe with some of the physical stuff, you'll talk, but you'll also include some physical parts. And that's also going to be important for your students because some of those 18, and what we see is roughly 20% of a given population, if it's a random distribution, roughly 20% will be at one end of the spectrum where they're either initiating in one of these modes. So here we're talking implementer, roughly 20%, or, about 3 or 4 of those kids in your group of 18 will be the kind of person that needs to construct, build, demonstrate. So if we're talking about a group discussion, let them know that, hey, for the discussion, one of the things you can do is bring something that you built or constructed or show us. Don't just talk about it, but show me some important object. And honestly, this is where you're at it. You teach, well, with the 5th and 6th graders, that's an age where most instruction starts taking the physical out. We don't do show and tell anymore. We don't let you construct things like dioramas are for little kids. They're for those 2nd graders like you're going to teach. And you take these kids who have a natural instinctive strength for showing and building, and you say, no, that's not important anymore. Man, you can, and I'm not saying you would have, too often the educational system demoralizes and crushes those kids. They're just as smart as they ever were. They just don't get to show it in the same ways.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in on that. Some of our most successful lessons, and I'll even use an example that you said, like when the students in my social studies class were asked at the end of the year to research any country they want. And this research was structured. They had, let's go major cities, let's go with culture, let's go with some historical events, right? But then they were given an opportunity to make something, right? And the different things that these students made were so awesome. Like some of them brought in, I'm going to make some food that country makes that we aren't familiar with. I'm going to bring it in, and everyone in the class can try it. I had other kids that made like a model jet from their military, from another country's military, right? And it's like you could see that like some of them, they thrive on the research, they thrive on the paper. It's necessary that everybody did that.
Yep.
But after that, you could see some of them that they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to make, right? I can't wait to show you what I made. I can't wait to go through all the steps of making it, right? And I think that those are some of the times when I saw at least half of my students be the absolute most engaged, right?
Yeah. Well, and especially as I was saying, they're in an age where even though you're giving them the opportunity, there's probably less of that than there was 2 or 3 years ago for them. So when they do have it, they it's like a light gets turned on, and you can, I mean, you've seen it, you read it on their faces, their body language changes. By the way, this is true for any of the action modes. If you tell a fact finder, researcher kind of person, hey, we just really want the summary, the top 3 things. Don't go deep on this because it's not important enough. That's tough on them. Or, oh, you can do all the research you want, but it's a short presentation, so you don't have time. Oh man, that's harder for them, and they can feel like, but I need to be able to share all that with you. So yeah, no, I love that you do that. And it sounds like you've already designed so much of your classroom around stuff that helps kids thrive with their Kolbe results.
I loved how you explained how I initially read my results as a weakness, and I was like, well, that's my weakness. And whenever you talked about it, well, someone on the other end might look at that as a strength and theirs as a weakness. And that honestly kind of motivated me to lean into my strengths a little more and understand them as strengths. But also, I mean, ever since I saw this initial presentation done in my classroom, that was the first light bulb that went off, where I was like, okay, wow, I already took the approach that all of my students are unique, but being able to see a little bit more specifically how they are unique, and specifically like the avenues that they need to go through to engage with the material. I'm really excited to start class next year with all these new ideas I have going on. And obviously I want to make some new systems, right? And I want to do some more research, right?
Yep.
But, I'm excited. I'm excited to apply it.
To me, you're demonstrating why your strength in Quick Start is such an amazing thing. But also, so you talked about you're excited to do new things with your classroom next year. So one of the misperceptions that people have of others and sometimes themselves, and you've already talked about this with yourselves, like, gosh, it's a weakness that I'm not spontaneous, or I don't just jump into the next new thing. Sometimes then people extrapolate to, oh, I'm always going to be stuck in my ways and I'm never going to do anything new. Or it might be outwardly somebody else, they're never going to change or do. No, they will when there's a framework and a system and you have the time and the luxury of doing some research and planning for it. You're excited about the opportunity to do something a little bit different, but it's because you have the ability to do it in a way that works for you. You've got some time to plan, to put it into a new structure, to learn about it. With your fact finder, you need to be a bit of an expert. Whereas if an administrator, when you're doing your teacher in service the week before school starts, if they came into your classroom and said, hey, everybody, I went to this thing at Columbia over the summer, this great new thing. You all are going to love it. Here it is. I've done the homework. I've done the plan. I'm giving it to you. So gosh, you don't have to plan. They think they're doing you such a favor. You don't have to plan. I've got the curriculum. You're just going to implement it. Your natural reaction, okay, you're smart enough not to tell them you're crazy, I'm not going to do it, but that's what's going through your mind. So your secondary reaction is people would see it as like passive aggressiveness. You just slow walk it. You don't implement it right away. What that administrator would then need to think about is, for a teacher like you, hey, if I want to make Raymond successful, and I want Raymond's buy-in, by the way, why don't I tell Raymond about this earlier? not spring it on him at the staff meeting with everybody else. Even if it's a week, when they get back from that thing, they should say, "Hey, Raymond, I'm really thinking about doing this and, giving this stuff to everybody for the coming year. Our meetings next week, can you look at it and can we talk about it the day beforehand? You're going to do some research. You're going to be able to at least start to put it into a plan." So it's still less time than you'd normally want the whole summer. But at least that 1 week is going to be so helpful for you, and it won't feel new and novel and experimental and unproven. And that administrator will think they're doing such a great thing for you by, again, that part of here, I'm just giving you the plan and the curriculum. But what they don't understand is if it's somebody like you need to do that yourself.
When I was first starting out teaching, very, very beginning, I had some lesson plans made for me and given to me, and I bombed in them. And I got very frustrated, and I didn't realize until after that so much of my strength in the classroom comes from being prepared, that preparedness came from making the lessons myself.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like, it's a very it's very obvious whenever I've done a lesson, and it's very obvious when I'm doing somebody else's lesson. You can see them and I had to record myself, right? So it's like, you can see these videos of me when it's someone's lesson and when it's mine. It's like two different people.
Yeah. And that's where you still have to achieve the same learning outcomes. You still have to have excellent teaching. It's not a matter of lowering the standards so that you fit them. It's a matter of you making it your own. And being able to do the planning and the research and all that. So I love that you've learned that. We help people learn those things earlier so that they don't have to learn them the hard way sometimes. It sounds like maybe you did where, I thought this would be easier, but it doesn't work as well.
Yeah, well, but learning this through the Kolbe system actually just helped identify exactly why, right? It's like I had these experiences, but now I can put a name to it and a reason behind it.
So one thing I would encourage you to do over the summer is think about how you will tell the other people on the team or the other second grade teachers and probably administrators as well. How are you going to tell them about you and how you thrive and where you will play the best role? And then how will you, because things like, if they think they're going to help you, like, "Hey, Raymond, we've been doing this at our school," which is true. Like, they've already got that stuff. You're going to need to be able to communicate to them, "Hey, I'm going to need to get this information." So maybe it's asking ahead of time, "Hey, can you send me all the stuff that you already have planned? I would love to look it over." And be realistic. Think about how people tend to react. You can flatter them, and that's a good thing. Because you want to step in that first day when you're, working together as a team, and these are people you're going to see every day. If they've already been conditioned to think of you as somebody who's really conscientious and thinks highly of them, so you can, I know you've got stuff already, and I would love to learn from what you've already done. What is it's really just setting you up for success. But at the same time, they're hearing, he cares about this. He's really thoughtful, and he appreciates the ideas. But oftentimes people can take it as a challenge. So that's why I think about the way you're delivering it. Instead of like, "Show me what you've already done," they can get the impression that you're doing it so that you can shake it up and change it because it's not going to be good enough. And that's not why. So just communicate with them that that's not why. But then when you start working with them, you can let them know, "Hey, this is me. This is how I thrive. I understand that there are going to be times where that might not be the role I need to play on this team. Don't worry, I get that. But really, I do my best when I have time to prepare, become an expert, do research, where I get to plan stuff out. Even if it's curriculum that you guys have already developed, I'd love to be able to work on it and make it my own a little bit and then share those ideas with you." Think about that ahead of time. Well, I've really enjoyed our discussion. Thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
David, it was a blast. Seriously, I'm so grateful that you had me on. I learned so much, and I'm like I said, I'm now excited for next year. I'm not going to wish my summer away. I earned it this summer, but I can't wait to get started again.
I love that. And Yeah, also a really heartfelt thank you for what you do as a teacher. And from what I'm hearing, you're already giving kids the freedom to be themselves, and designing the way you teach and the opportunities for them to accommodate all kinds of different strengths. So really thank you for that. Even though it's not my kids, it's the world, and
Yeah, thank
making
you.
it better. All
Thank
right.
you for
Well,
saying
thanks,
that.
Raymond. It's been great.
Hey, have a good one, David.